Saving Marty, Part 3, Summer. Chapter 27, The Scorcher. The morning after school ended was the hottest yet, and it was time for Pal to leave. The Pittsburgh Professional Children's School offered her a full scholarship beginning the next September. Meanwhile, they invited her to their summer camp in the mountains. After camp, she was going to live in the city with her aunt until Mr. Lee could find a job up there. We wrapped ourselves into the truck bed seats of Mr. Lee's pickup and headed for the train station. Bella had slept in, but Marty wasn't missing out on the truck ride. His ears and jowls flapped on the highway gusts, and that got Pal laughing, which got her crying. She yelled into the back of the window, "Daddy, turn around. I'm not going unless they take Renzo too." "Oh, the drama," I said. "You think I want to go to that musty old camp anyway, singing for your supper, your lunch too, your crummy instant oatmeal breakfast?" "You're probably right," she said. "They warned me it's rustic. That just means there's no free Wi-Fi. Promise me we'll talk every night. Serious, Renz. When I call, you better pick up." "I always do," I said. "If you're home, when are you ever going to get your own phone?" "Never." "You're so annoying. People want to get in touch with you when they want to." "And that's why I don't have my own phone," I said. Pal smoothed down Marty's floppy ears. "Marty, moo," she said. He cocked his head and grunted. The train pulled into the station. Mr. Lee made sure Pal had her hug me bear. He hugged her fast and got back into the truck. Marty and I walked her to the platform where the train was waiting. Now she hugged Marty. "I'll be back, boy. I'll see you soon." He latched onto her jean cuff with his teeth. I gave her the peach jar filled with my dad's guitar picks. "I went through them last night," I said. "Check out this one." It was close enough to gold-colored, and Dad had written the name of the bar he had used it in, Gloria's. We touched foreheads. The boarding bell rang. "You're my hero," she said. "Me? Why?" She didn't say. She hugged me until the conductor called out the window, "Let's go!" She went in, and she didn't look back. Marty squealed softly, his eyes on the train as it got smaller and smaller. "Okay, Marty. Come on now, boy." He wouldn't budge. I sat cross-legged next to him on the platform. He leaned into me, and we stared down the empty line of track. How in the world could I be Paloma Lee's hero? I was the guy who wasn't good enough to get into music school. I wasn't headed for anything, or anywhere particularly special, I was pretty sure. It was almost 100 degrees that morning. It was a scorcher, all right. Chapter 28, The Growing Problem. Mr. Taylor called Mom to tell her he got sober and got religion. He wasn't asking us to drop the charges. He wanted us to thank us for waking him up. So, of course, we dropped the charges. After that, Mom hadn't seen him at church. The judge said the Taylor boys and the musclehead Tommy had to keep 500 feet away from me and my family, and that included Marty. So I wasn't too worried about getting beat up when Mom asked me to sell peaches from our roadside table a week after Pal left for music camp. "If folks see the actual fruit," Mom said, "maybe they'll stop." They didn't. The problem with working a slow peach stand is you have too much time to think. If I had any chance of figuring out my future, I had to know my past, like my dad said in his letters. I kept going back to what he wrote on his guitar. "My heart is a drum." It was eating at me. What did that mean? Mom brought me lunch and Marty. "He keeps staring at you from the window and oinking," she said. "He ate my lunch and he napped at my feet." I couldn't stop thinking about that Hannah person either, the one who donated blood again and again. My dad described her as an angel on earth. Mason said Dad was honorable, not the type to fall in love with someone else, besides Mom. But then again, Mason took pride in being a good liar. Marty nudged me with his snout and put his hoof in my lap. This was his way of telling me I was wondering too much again, but I couldn't stop wondering what Pal was up to. We talked for an hour that first night she was at camp, about how miserable she was missing everybody. The next night we talked less, because she was tired after singing all day. The night after that, she didn't call. I got a hold of her the next night, but she was off to bed because I had an early class the next day. A movement class. Who needs to teach somebody how to move, Marty? You just do it, right, boy? You just keep moving. On a day this nice, Pal and I would have gone tubing on the river, and then tonight we would have watched Chasing Mavericks and rifled with our guitars. I hadn't picked up a note since she left. A month into that slow-motion summer, Marty started to get into trouble of a more serious kind. By now, he weighed 350 pounds. He ate anything. Stray grass, wild hay, acorns, all the peaches too ugly to sell. Mom's church friends dropped off slops by the pound. Feeding him was never a problem. The problem was he still thought he was a puppy. One afternoon, I came in from working in the orchard. Marty jumped up to kiss me and knocked my front tooth loose. Double made a brace out of a popsicle stick and dental floss. I was walking around like a goof for a week while my teeth tightened into place, just as crooked as they were before. Another time, Marty went for his ball and ran over the neighbor's mailbox. That cost me $80 for the replacement and a half a day to dig a new hole, then mix the cement and set the new pole, all in 94-degree weather. While I worked, Marty chased field mice. He cornered one in a weed collecting bucket. Whether it turned on him or just had nowhere to run but at him, Marty got scared and hid behind me. That was the end of mouse chasing. But it was the morning I went to cut Mrs. Brancellini's lawn that trouble really kicked up a notch. Marty just had to come with me, of course. When I finished up, Mrs. B wanted to treat Marty and me to frofu. We were fanning ourselves on the bench in front of Miss Carmela's when Miss B and I got into debating the difference between strawberries versus nuts, strawberries, nuts. "How is Pal?" Miss B said. I didn't know. The past couple of weeks we had barely spoken once. "She's in 2 musicals for summer stock," I said. "How fun!" She slapped my knee. "Listen, let me ask you something about your double pop. To be perfectly frank, he is one handsome man. Do you think he might want to come over to my house for breakfast sometime?" A little girl ran up to us. "That pig's laying in the exact same spot he was when I crossed this way half an hour ago. Is that all he does?" "In this heat?" "Yep," I said. "He's ugly," she said. "When did children become so dreadful?" Mrs. B said. "Where's your mother at, you wretched little girl?" "Move, pig," she said, and she pulled his tail. Marty spun on her and gave her a big fat kiss. She lost her balance and plunked down on her butt. She was a screamer. Suddenly, her mother materialized from the air. "What happened?" "That pig bit me." "On top of being an ugly little creature, your daughter is a liar," Mrs. B said. "How dare you?" said the mom. She spun from Mrs. B to me. "You make us all so uncomfortable trudging that poor hog all over creation for the world to make fun of him." She started off and then turned back. "You're just lucky Caitlin's not hurt serious. You're lucky I don't sue you." "Your daughter is a deceitful little monster," Mrs. B yelled as they went off. "Poor Marty," she said, and she offered him a spoonful of her ice cream. He ate that and then the whole sundae in a bite. Mrs. B laughed so hard she farted, and she kept right on farting. "Oh, Renzo, I'm so sorry. Oh my, I can't stop." Marty stuck his nose down by her butt and breathed in deep. "Oh, Marty, you are a cure," Mrs. B said, cackling. "You can't be sad around him, you just can't." What the heck, I thought. I farted back at her. I was sad, though. What passed for entertainment these days was a fart fight with Mrs. B. Chapter 29. The Pig Who Thought He Was a Dog, Days of August. In early August, I got Marty onto the barn scale. Whoa! 373. Marty wagged his tail like that was a good thing. The mother of that tail puller girl was right. People were gawking at Marty. I worried about taking him anywhere past Maple Clutch Fence these days. Still, folks stared from their cars at the pig in the dog collar, except dog collars didn't come that big. We ended up using one of Double's old army belts. I dumped a bucket of slops into Marty's trough. He finished in 1 minute and came to where I sat against the wall. He burped in my face and settled in next to me. Then we watched the heat flies zigzag past the barn door. That night, I woke up in the crack between the mattress and the wall. Marty and Bella were spread over the rest of the bed. I shoved my way back onto the mattress, and Marty grumbled. He hopped down and curled up on top of the dog bed he used to sleep in when he was 20-pound piglet. His belly covered the whole thing. Later, he jumped back into my bed and broke it. The legs cracked, and down it went. That morning, I woke to a rant from Mom. "A pig in a bed, and a broken one, no less. I have a mind to turn him that pig into a blanket. Turn him into a pig in a blanket. Look," she held out a peach pie, or what was left of it. "I put this in the fridge specifically so he wouldn't get at it. That pig has figured out how to open the door now. Marty, bad boy." Marty shivered and looked away. I swear he was thinking, if I can't see you, maybe you can't see me. "Marty," Mom yelled. He put his head under the pillow. "Lorenzo Ventura, that is not funny." "Then why are you laughing, Ma?" "That pie was for the church bake sale, Renzo. Goodness gracious, this pig, this poor pig, how does this end?" And now she was crying a little. She went out and it wasn't funny anymore. I waited until the front door slammed and the sound of her truck faded. I climbed out of my broken bed and moped to the kitchen. Double had brought home a box of Lucky Charms that had been run over by the forklift. The manager at Walmart let him have it at quarter price, which made me wonder why the forklift drivers didn't run over stuff all the time. I poured the box into 2 bowls, one for me and one for Marty. Then I flipped open Mom's laptop and checked on Pal's Instagram. Summer up in the mountains looked a lot more fun than summer in Maple Clutch. In one picture, she was on stage dabbing with a boy as tall as I was and a whole lot thinner. He had a ukulele strung over his shoulder. She had already found her new backup man. Yep, she was gone for good now. Marty plunked his head in my lap and wagged his tail. I gave him the rest of the Lucky Charms. The hottest day of summer came in at 103 degrees, no wind. The foxtail meadow across the street was so still it looked like an overexposed picture. I was down at the bottom of the driveway again with Marty and the so-called Peaches. This time I'd brought a moldy cocktail table umbrella to shade us. The glare was so bad with the heat wiggling off the road top, I had to shut my eyes. I passed out for I don't know how long. Marty woke me with a whimpering and a nudge to my thigh. Except it wasn't Marty, it was Bella. "What's wrong, girl?" I looked around for Marty, and he was gone again. Bella led me to a fresh hole in our neighbor Mrs. Tomlinsino's fence, and then brought the bramble to a small pasture. Then through the bramble to a small pasture Mrs. T kept for a pair of dairy cows, and right then I knew it was going to be a mess. Back in the spring, Mrs. T wanted me to bring Marty over to meet Rosie and Petunia. Marty loved them. They were terrified of him. They didn't mind when Bella ran circles around them and then did the odd flyby, but when Marty did it, no, a pig acting like a dog was too much for a cow, apparently. Marty chased them back into their barn that day, and this 103-degree day he chased Rosie into a gully too steep to climb out. Marty oinked at her from the top lip of the gully. She lowed back at him. She was on her feet and grazing, but I had no idea how we were going to get her out of that ditch. We made a blanket harness and ran a chain from Buck's trailer hitch. Double drove the mower while Mom and I pushed on Rosie's haunch. Bella and Marty lay down on the grass and watched. Mrs. T thought the whole thing was pretty funny, but Mom was not amused. "I'll let you have this pig for free, Mrs. T. I'll deliver to you to him to you in the form of sausages." "Now, Jenny, nobody got hurt, and it's all going to be fine," Mrs. T said. "It's not fun at all," Mom said. "Renzo, push, will you?" "Mom, what do you think I'm doing?" "Here we go," said Double. He revved Buck's engine, and there was a great groaning, and then a metallic snap, so loud it scared Rosie right out of that gully. "Tell you what," Double said, "that was not a particularly lovely sound." Mom got right up into Marty's face and screamed, "Beelzebub!" Now, Double said. "Now nothing, Daddy. Any guesses as to how much it's going to cost to fix that tractor? Put me down for $600. And she popped a handful of Tums. The next morning I was on the bowl reading the new Wimpy Kid when Mom yelled from the hall, "Renzo, Mercy, can't you close the door?" Except I couldn't, not with Bella and Marty napping at my feet. Marty was 6 feet long by now, and half of him stuck out into the hall. "When you finish up in there, go help Double load the truck, and for Pete's sake, if not mine, will you please light a match? Do they have to be with you in the toilet even?" "It's the only show in town right now, Ma." Double's war buddy had died the week before, and the man's last request was that Double head down to North Carolina to spread his ashes at Chimney Rock. I went out to the barn to help Double get set with his camping gear. He was with Kenny, our mechanic, who was under Buck. "You got a cracked axle here, and the struts are shot. I'd say parts and labor gonna run you close to $1,000. It's a tough one, Dub, I know." "You don't think he can hold out any longer, old Buck?" Double said. "1,000, huh? I just don't know as we have that much on hand right now, Kenny." "You might wring another month or two out of him," Kenny said. Double walked him to his van. I slumped against Buck's big old bald tires. Marty brought me his tennis ball, pure slobber. He bounced it and caught it. "Marty, can't you just be good? Please? Please, boy, please?" I rested my forehead on his, and then I felt Double's hand on my shoulder, and he sat next to me. Marty tried to climb into his lap. "Marty, no!" I shoved him away. "She's going to make me get rid of him, isn't she?" "We'll work it out, Renz. He's not even a year old yet. He'll calm down." "Tell that to Mom," I said. "Oh, believe me, I have," Double said. "Can I see them?" I nodded at the tin container in his hand. It was exactly the size of a Coke can. "I don't think Carlos would mind." Double screwed off the lid. "Wow, that's really him?" "Part of him," Double said. He let me hold the can. It didn't look any different than fireplace ash. I don't know what I was expecting. Something more? "Double, tell me something I don't know about my dad." "You're having a rough summer, aren't you?" "Tell me about Hannah," I said. "Hannah?" "Yes, Renz, I think you have a right to know everything you can about your dad, but it's not for me to tell you about Hannah." "So there is something there." "Your mom made me promise that she would be the one to tell you when and only when she thinks you're ready." "I'm ready," I said. "I want to know. I don't mean to put you in the middle of it, but can't you tell me? I won't say anything to Mom." "Now, son, I wouldn't do that to your mom, and the Renzo I know wouldn't do that to his mom either. I'll talk with her after my little trip here, and we'll make time for the three of us to sit down, and your mom will answer all of your questions or tell you why she can't. And Renz, it's hard for her, too." "I know," I said. "I know you do. Give it a few more days till I get back from Chimney Rock, okay?" "What about Marty?" I said. Do your best to keep him out of trouble until I'm home.